From Elizabeth Ney in the 19th century to the late Charles Umlauf, Austin has been blessed by noted sculptors. Today we're going to meet another gifted individual who practices in this medium. To meet her and to see her works, please join us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the show. And today we're going to be turning our attention to the sculpting spirit, to reflect upon the meaning of sculpture as an expression of a person's convictions as well as of one's talent. We have an individual who has been working in this medium locally, and we're glad to welcome Ginger Geyer.
Thank you.
Ginger, you're not only practicing individually, but you have an adjunct teaching position at Concordia University, and you are also a member of University Methodist Church. Mm-hmm. And as we look at what you have done professionally and as this gives expression to your faith, we're looking forward to having you share that. But first of all, tell us how you got into this particular art form.
I started doing sculpture only about 6 years ago, and that was after a long stint of working in the Dallas Museum of Art, where I had a daily parade of masterpieces before me, and couldn't quite do any artwork then. It was a little bit unnerving to see so much.
Well, intimidating, huh?
Yeah. Then we moved to Austin, had 2 children, and I found myself at home in a completely different atmosphere, and I simply had to do something, and sculpture, for some reason, grabbed me. Mm-hmm. I took a very simple clay decorating class, pottery decorating class at Laguna Gloria to kind of get started.
Oh, really?
And it was sort of a gentle nudging back into something I'd always wanted to do. And those little plates suddenly became bowls, and then the bowls developed into sculptural forms, and I started experimenting with different glazes, and eventually found that it was kind of addictive. Mm-hmm.
So, addiction, that's the answer.
A good addiction.
Yeah, but a constructive one.
Yeah.
You know, as you describe that, I can't help but think of a young person I saw this summer by the shores of Lake Michigan when I happened to be visiting up there. And immediately this kid got to the shoreline and started building sandcastles.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
all my
for
students
hours.
feel there's something very familiar when they first get into clay. I said, it's mud pies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So it's fun to do.
Oh, yeah.
But
great
you know,
fun to do.
I also think it's hard work because I have visions of Michelangelo chiseling out, you know, the Moses or some other great work, and I mean, it seems so laborious. And I mean, do you work in marble and this kind of thing?
No, I just work with clay. I work with porcelain clay, which is a different type of clay than you would use for most pottery. It's very, I call it persnickety kind of clay. It's very fine and delicate, and it requires its own treatment, sort of. But
I see.
I don't use wood. I don't use stone very much. I'm giving myself some limits, kind of like a poet might do with a sonnet.
I see.
And working within those.
Okay. Well, we're pleased to have some video that shows your work and gives you, and during it you're explaining a little bit what the works are, but after we come back we'll have a chance to have you interpret a bit more than what we see here, but we're looking forward to it.
Okay.
So let's let that roll if we could, please.
What I do is I take porcelain clay and I sculpt it into different shapes that are usually quite realistic. Often trompe l'oeil, fool the eye, not with the intention to fool anybody or to deceive, but to give kind of a trigger into your own associations. I'm making art that may be about spiritual things, it may be about funny and annoying things, but you know, basically it's about life. And it's full of playfulness, it's full of art history, and it's full of hard work. I've got just a few simple tools that are my favorites. And the trickiest thing of ceramics for me, having come from a painting background, is controlling the color, because it has a mind of its own. It's not at all like regular paint. This is the most recent thing in my toy box. This is a Jack-in-the-Box. I asked a friend, what are your first impressions of a Jack-in-the-Box? What do you think of when you think of a Jack-in-the-Box? He says, well, you know, I remember how I'd crank that little handle and try to control the song so that the thing would pop up when I wanted it to. And so, you know, I started thinking a lot about the song, the All Around the Carpenter's Shop, the monkey chased the weasel. And so I decided to do All Around the Carpenter's Shop around the Jack-in-the-Box. So we've got all around the box different paintings that have to do with carpenter shops. These are details that I've copied from some paintings. Sometimes I like to take off with art history and combine it with everyday objects. Now then, like with a lot of my pieces, this has parts that move, and this one has a head that turns around. This is not so much the Trinity as a three-faced God with a lower G. This is my favorite one. He is mean, he is out to get you, he is the judge. And you stick him on your Jack-in-the-Box the day that you are ready to damn somebody who doesn't agree with you, as we have many politicians these days doing. This face is the suffering, rather pitiful Jesus who comes to your pity party when you feel like it. And this one is sweet Jesus. Tells you everything is okay. So anyway, this gets into the idea of taking God and cramming God into a box and popping him out whenever you want him out. This is called the pot calling the kettle black. And on the front of this pot and kettle are little figures that are adapted from the Hildesheim doors, some doors in Germany of early medieval art. Anyway, on them are Adam and Eve. And, you know, the idea of Adam pointing at Eve and blaming her, and then she blames the serpent, and on it goes. Well, I started carving this piece right here, the pot or the kettle, whichever this is, and I was carving the figure of Adam on it. And suddenly, to my horror, I realized, oh no, Adam must be the one here, the one with the little wicked spout. And so I got to play God for a little while and change Eve into Adam, or the other way around. Anyway, so now we've got Adam here and Eve here. The pot calling the kettle black.
Okay, well, I was chuckling here just watching that. I think the one thing that makes you different from Elizabeth Ney or Charles Umlauf is that you got humor in your stuff.
Oh yeah, have to.
Yeah.
That's just part of me, so it comes out.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it gives you a way of letting it come out. That, I mean.
Yeah, well, you know, making art for me, it's about playing, really. I mean, it's, when Jesus said become like little children, I kind of take that literally sometimes, and I play with it.
Yeah.
Have fun with it.
Sometimes not even necessarily know where you're going with it, and it just sort of surprises you. Have you had that experience?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I imagine any artist could tell you that, or else they're working in formulas and, you know. Yeah, you got to let the process kind of dictate the end result.
Well, now, those two pieces, the Jack-in-the-Box and the pot calling the kettle black, are each of them had religious themes to them. The Jack-in-the-Box was like trying to keep God in a box. I mean, that's the message I got out of that. Was it that?
Yeah, if you water it down, I think that's pretty much what it is.
And yet
the other one is just sort of a joke.
Yeah. Well,
Though it's deeper than a joke, really.
It's deeper than a joke, right.
Yeah, on the surface, there's a lot of humor in my work, and maybe that's attractive to some people. You know, some people don't get my humor. It's okay. But if you scratch below that, usually you'll find that I'm poking at something meaningful. And the joke is kind of a hook to get you into it, usually.
Okay. I mean, to me, I like the pot calling the kettle black because that's what the story's about.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed Adam.
And the serpent.
And the serpent. And it was this...
it kind of goes round and around.
Yeah, pass the buck. Could have called it that, but except that it fits your forms, your objects there.
Yeah, I looked long and hard for a teapot to model that one after.
Yeah. And was there any significance in the fact that they were black?
The pots?
Yeah.
Well, just because the pot calling the kettle black, you think of a cast iron pot and kettle. That's all.
It just fits.
But those are porcelain. I've glazed them to look like they're cast iron.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the Jack-in-the-Box, you got the 3 heads.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was not the Trinity, but it was various. It looked like people's various conceptions of God or of Jesus.
Yeah. Rather erroneous perceptions of Jesus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The judgmental, I remember that.
Yeah, mean and judgmental, you know, the Pantocrator from Byzantine art.
Yeah.
And then the kind of sweetie pie, sugar-coated Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that's sort of like a suicide waiting to happen.
Kind of the, self-pity one, I remember that.
Those 3.
Uh-huh.
I get off on that theme again in another piece where I have 10 different little kind of stereotypes of Jesus. I'm always asking that question in my work, really. Who is he?
Mm-hmm.
And partly that's because I'm always trying to work that out myself in my own faith journey.
Mm-hmm.
So you see a lot of the things I'm struggling with come out in the artwork, and it helps to talk about them with a group of people. I really am getting real intent on serving the audience, and I'm finding that different audiences respond to my work in different ways, but because there's so many levels, if you will, in the work, finding that it really appeals to a broad range of people I wouldn't think it would appeal to.
Kind of catches their own faith issues as well as to appeal to their sense of humor.
Yeah, snags them somewhere, seems to.
And you've also got this reference to a great work of art in Europe. What was that again? That this pot calling the kettle black was patterned after?
Oh yeah, there's a wonderful set of bronze doors in Hildesheim, Germany.
Oh yeah.
On the cathedral. It's a piece of Ottonian art, 11th century, and there are many panels of different biblical images on there, and this happens to be the one of Adam and Eve.
I see. So you made an intentional connection with that, that image which some people could identify with.
Yeah, I borrow a lot from art history since I had this museum background that kind of kept it in my forefront all the time. So I'm always bringing in some image that kind of floats into my consciousness and putting it into a work of art and combining it maybe with some commercial object or everyday thing.
One thing we're going to have to do is float out of this program for a moment.
Float out?
And take a bit of a break.
Sound like Chagall. Okay.
We'll be right back, and glad to have you here on Austin Faith Dialogue. So, welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today we are enjoying the sculpting spirit as represented by Ginger Geyer. local artist who also teaches at Concordia University. And in the first half of the show, Ginger, we were looking at a couple of your pieces that immediately jumped out at us as having intentional humor and an expression of faith. There were religious themes. And that with your art history background, you were saying you could use certain models that are sort of prototypical or well-known to the public and give a different play to them. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I'm wondering about as we get into the second half is that you said you were at Dallas. You worked in a museum there. Mm-hmm. You were intimidated by all the great art that you saw around you, but that didn't keep you from finally doing it. And you went from being kind of in the curator style to the actual creative side of it. Mm-hmm. And can you identify exactly how that came about?
Well, I grew up doing art, and it was always part of my life. And art and faith were always all tangled up for me, you know. It was kind of one and the same. And not doing it those years at the museum, I was doing a lot of creative work, and it was very satisfying. But I knew that I had a gift, and I had repressed it.
I see.
And I'm kind of the opinion that if you have a talent and you don't use it, one of these days it's going to rise up and get you. Mm. You're going to have to do it. You know, so things had to fall apart first for me to get back on track and start making art again. It took just a fair amount of growing up to convince me to get with it. Mm-hmm. Finally just had to and did. Mm-hmm. So
there was almost like you went through a certain amount of suffering before you finally came to that realization.
Yeah, I had to leave the museum behind.
I see. Okay. Big decision.
It was. It was hard because I loved it.
Yeah.
But it forced me into taking a look at what I was good at and trying that on again after many years. And glad I did.
I think of the agony, the ecstasy of, Michelangelo.
Man, you're naming all the biggies here.
Yeah, so I'm trying to put you in their league.
Yeah, thanks. I don't paint upside down.
Well, after folks get a look at the next series of your works, I'm sure that they'll agree that you are a talent. And you've seen that already, but now let's look at some more that's on the video.
This piece with the two monkeys I call Monkey Mind Marriage, and it too comes from art history, but you wouldn't know it necessarily unless I showed you this picture. This is one of the icons of art history. It's a painting of Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride by Van Eyck. In the painting, the two are just sort of barely touching hands, and it's more of an ownership issue. My pair have on the hat and the veil of this married couple. But the big difference is in their arms. They're firmly linked here. In fact, it's very hard to get these two monkeys apart. They love each other. Any creative person constantly asks, where do you get your ideas? I say, some people call it magic. I tend to call it grace. It's a very fortuitous and felicitous thing if an idea comes really together and really gels. Legend has it when Johann Sebastian Bach was asked, where do you get your ideas? You're so prolific. He replied, oh, I have so many. I'm lucky if I don't trip over them every morning. And I kind of envisioned this, big fat Bach wandering around in his bunny slippers kicking light bulbs, and hence we have a broken light bulb here. And we have a whole light bulb on it. It's a porcelain rendition of a music book like I had when I was a kid. I was not much of a musician, but my piano teacher, would mark up the pages and give me a gold star if I finally mastered a piece. Such a familiar piece, such a wonderful piece. And I love to take things that are really familiar and try to pull something new and fresh out of them. This piece is one of my favorites, this lunchbox. I made it using a slab and draping it in an actual lunchbox, which sounds pretty simple, but it's really rather hard to get
something that fragile then to stand up without breaking. This is hollow. All of it's porcelain. The painting on the front is Crucifixion by Grunwald. For some reason, I had to paint this painting on a lunchbox, and I really did not know why I felt so compelled to do it. It made no sense, so I thought, well, maybe this will work. If it's a bit absurd, that helps, you know. And I realized the name of it would be a cliche that we all have heard. There's no such thing as a free lunch. All of these things take on ethical and religious connotation if you want to push it into that. Or you can just take them because they're kind of fun to play with.
No kidding. I know. You said we could touch them. Oh.
Kids have sometimes the most gratifying responses of anybody. Because, you know, kids come to it without these preconceptions that they have to be cool when they look at art. They see that you can take a piece of art and do something with it. Touch it, play with it.
What are they?
For adults, that kind of opens up the kid in us, too.
It did. But
I've been asked many times if these come in editions or if I make molds and, you know, make lots of the same thing, and the answer is no. I don't particularly delight in repeating myself. As you can see, these are all very different looking objects, but they have a familiar thread all the way through them. It feels almost like a luxury to get to make art. I feel like there's a call to make it more accessible somehow, to let other people in on it. I don't intend to put my beliefs on someone else, but hopefully to get them thinking more into theirs.
Okay, well, you used the word call there, or calling.
Mm-hmm.
And let's have you expand on what you said there in the video as to what that means for you.
Well, that one piece where you saw the kids flipping through those little red boxes of cards, all those little cards are made out of porcelain clay, and each one of them is sort of like a business card or a Victorian calling card. So I call it the calling card collection. And it's all about a person's sense of call, sense of vocation. And to me, it's like sometimes you find out that people get, you know, big, forceful calls. It's like getting bushwhacked by the Holy Spirit or something, you know. Other times it's just a little nudge, not too sure, and other times it's just all messed up with all the other junk going on in the world, and all that clutter and the noise of your everyday world gets in the way, or disguises it, or prevents you from calling back or answering. So anyway, all these little cards each have something written on them that has something to do with deciphering a call and helping figure out maybe what that is.
Okay, now we couldn't see that in this video. We just saw
Yeah.
kids kind of rummaging through something. But give us an example of what would have been on one of those cards.
Well, they're categorized in all these different categories. I'm doing the crazy thing of trying to categorize a mystery, which of course is impossible, so this collection keeps growing. But for instance, there's a whole section called useful calls, and it might have something in there like nature calls, or roll call at school, or house calls by a doctor, or something like that. Then there might be a section, there's a section called call killers, and that would be like telemarketing at dinner time.
Oh,
or
okay,
something.
yeah.
But woven in with all those things are different scriptures that have to do with calls, or lines out of a hymn, like Jesus softly calling you home, and you know,
Oh, yeah,
it
quite a
combines the
mix then.
profound and the corny.
Well, I think that what you were saying before in terms of leaving the museum and turning yourself to being an artist rather than an interpreter, or what you do in museums otherwise, spoke to me of a call, because it meant that you had to leave something you were familiar with. Abraham left what was familiar to go out and into not knowing where he and Sarah were going.
Yeah.
And so you've had an experience of a call, it sounds like, from that standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. I like the call of Moses the best. I mean, when God, you know, gives him the burning bush, I mean, isn't that enough evidence? Moses, you know, turns around and says, you know, I've got a speech impediment.
Yeah.
and comes up with all these excuses, but eventually gives in.
Uh-huh.
That was me.
I see. You were more like Moses then.
But I've got 2 little kids. I don't have time for this.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to say that one of the ones that really kind of grabbed me there was the lunchbox.
Yeah.
And then you turned it after you had the crucifixion on the side panel by Grunwald,
Right.
and then you turned it up and it says, there's no free lunch.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
As a free lunch.
Yep. Yep. That was a combination of a really bad cliche and a really wonderful work of art.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which are so familiar you don't see them anymore, you don't hear what they say anymore, and that combination came to me in a very graceful way, so I knew it was important. And even though it also seemed a little bit scary, I mean, sometimes you end up making something you're a little bit frightened by. It seemed kind of harsh, you know.
The implication was that if Jesus died for the sin of the world, the sacrifice,
Yeah.
it's not free.
Yeah, it's what Bonhoeffer called cheap grace.
Yeah.
The whole idea that you can skip the crucifixion and go straight to Easter,
Uh-huh.
which, you know, is a problem in a lot of Christian communities.
Yeah. Well, that was, did you start out with the saying or did you start out with the painting? What did you start out with in that particular one?
The painting came before the saying did.
Mm-hmm.
Remember in there I said I didn't know why I did this, and then
yeah.
this sort of, flits in the window that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and
Okay.
that gave me the title.
Okay, that was an excellent illustration of how the creative process works because you can't see the end from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You also had the one about the couple that was standing there that was
the Van Eyck
based
painting?
on the icon of Van Eyck.
Yeah.
And I think that was touching. I mean, except that yours were kind of parodies of that, and yet you were trying to show that there was a real affection there.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's kind of a personal piece for me and my husband.
I see.
Because we each had these monkeys.
I see. Okay. Well, we'll just take your
They
word
got
for that.
together.
And I think that we'll take what you said today here and shown us today here as an expression of a faith that is indeed creative, and both in sculpting and in your life otherwise. And as a member of University Methodist Church, I think that you have something to share with your faith community as well.
Yeah, it's a great support group there.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Ginger Geyer. Thank you, folks, for being with us. Join us next week on Austin Faith Dialogue.